Welcome, listeners, to the latest episode of Last Week with INDIAai. I'm Sindhuja and I'm joined by my colleague Jibu. Together, we bring you the latest news, analysis, and insights in the world of AI. Hi, Jibu. Welcome. How are you?
Hi, Sandhuja. Good to be again back on the podcast. I think it was, I think, we mentioned last time about Techtober and the Techtober in terms of research is happening very much. We have so many interesting things happening in the area of AI research.
Yeah.
So many things. I think we generally speak about, AGI and how far AGI is away, but it seems like all the parts and components that required to build an AGI, it's
Mm-hmm.
being developed, like modularly, here and there, right? Because last week we did mention how robots are developed, which can now feel pain, and how they can heal themselves, right? So it's not like somebody's gonna sit and build a Frankenstein's monster, right? I mean,
Yeah.
what is his name? Okay, Okay, Frankenstein's monster was called Adam, I think. Yes, its name was Adam. People used to think Frankenstein is a monster, but Victor Frankenstein is the scientist who created this monster, and he named it Adam, if I'm so yeah, that's a bit of trivia here. Yeah, I think we are in a way that nobody's gonna create an AGI like that or a ASI whenever that happens. But
Yeah.
here and there, little by little bit, every part it seems like under development. So why I'm saying this is now is because there's a recent research, right, which makes a staggering similarity between how humans see and neural networks see objects, right? So
Mm.
it's so how we see things is, I mean, we have this visual, neurons in our visual cortex, they're called V4 neurons or something like that, right? Now
Yeah.
they are tuned to get the orientation, the spatial frequency, color, the 3D depth, everything, right? I mean, we have two eyes, and we I think we have learned in our school days about the stereoscopic vision, and
Correct.
how how the image fall on our retina as a inverse image, and how we process it as the straight one, when all these things, right?
Mm.
So that's how we see things, how humans perceive things. But a couple of researchers at John Hopkins University, has discovered that AI neurons, neural net, actually has similar characteristics. So they have learned it also observe images, or it also see, let's use the word see here, in a
Mm.
similar fashion. And
Right.
they observed it in this deep neural computer vision network called AlexNet, right?
Mm.
And the similarity has been very how do I say, very striking, and quite interesting, what is happening in the world of AI, right?
Yeah.
So many interesting research happening, so many especially abroad as well as India. I mean, you can see all those things happening in India AI, and it's fascinating how much of research is happening lately in this field.
Yeah, definitely. I think your conversation that you just, this particular conversation really reminds me of the webinar that we had with Dr. Manansuri. You were the one
Yep,
that were moderating it. I'm sure you remember it quite well. And he spoke about
definitely.
neuromorphic computing, right? And
Yes,
he
he's a
essentially
close
spoke
friend
about,
also, so I
yeah.
will
So
speak
in
about
that
it.
particular webinar really stuck with me. I think it's also because it was so technical. I had to listen to it more than once to really get the transcript right. But it was also a very fascinating take into how essentially the closest model known to man in terms of trying to imitate or try to sort of bring to life the fastest supercomputer we know, which is the human brain. So I think in that sense, I think the fact that you have AI models which are actually looking and seeing and visualizing like a human eye can, I think is something which is very much in
Yeah.
line to that. I think that
And
conversation sort of
here is a
makes
trivia.
sense.
Here's a
Yeah.
trivia. I mean, yes, I mean, we speak about a data storage in DNA and things like that. And like you just mentioned now, human brain are the biggest, best computers out there.
Yeah.
I mean, if you, I don't know if you're a fan, but I'm a fan of the movie series called Matrix. And in that
Of
movie,
course. Mm.
in the movie, it says that the humans are being harvested to generate energy, right, from body heat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, the original script had it's that the machines were using human brains to create this huge neural network. So back
There you
then
go.
it was, yep, back then it was a way out of futuristic idea, and the studio executives couldn't understand what a neural network was and
Yeah.
how, so they said, like, okay, using humans as battery was easy for audience to digest.
Actually,
So
in a
yeah.
very simplistic way, that's exactly what The Matrix is trying to show us. And even back then, it was a movie that was very ahead of its time. And 20 odd years later, I think, the pieces kind of fit together right now,
Yep,
with
yep.
little
God,
by
it's
little. So
20
yeah,
years. I can't believe it. 20
still
years.
more than 20. And I think that reiterates our age. And I,
I think speaking about metrics, I mean there is another interesting news. I think you might be familiar with that. How now we are designing these video games
Mhm.
where you have these characters which can interact each other inside the video game,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. That's right.
So it's like, see, it's like you see, Elon Musk often mentions, I mean, I have there are moments in which I adore the man and I hate the man, but we had to agree that he's a genius. So
Yeah, that's unequivocally we have to agree. I think, he may have his quirks, but at the end of the day, he's presenting something completely new to this
yeah.
world. And I think his is a genius that will be appreciated a lot more, you know, many years later. But
So that
yeah, yeah,
there's a whole question, right? Like people like Nick Bostrom ask, are we living in simulation? I mean, since we mentioned metrics.
yeah,
So, I mean, we could be, like with the brain in the vat experiment, like just a human brain kept in a, jar and given the electrical current, it can feel and imagine things.
yeah.
But Elon Musk says we could be characters in a highly advanced video game developed by future humans or
Hmm.
future species, whatever species that is, right? And he's saying is there's a 98% chance. And now we are seeing where you have created, like people at Georgia Tech and Facebook AI, they developed this environment, right? A
Yeah.
fantasy game environment where you can have these AI agents, with NLP capabilities. You can speak to game characters, and complete actions and things like that, right? That's
Yeah.
very fascinating, where this research is heading to.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. Like, I think it's just I think right now it just seems like there are no limits or boundaries to what AI can really do, and it's good that you have these simulated exercises happening in labs and researchers are actually being a little bold and not little, being very bold and really pushing the boundaries. I think it's good to see what works in lab setting and then try and figure out what can actually be implemented in the real world. And I think the next bit of research that I found today, which I wanted to talk to our listeners about, is really just that. I think one of the most interesting applications of machine learning in recent times is to really try and understand the effect of COVID-19 on mental health. Now, this is a topic that I'm very passionate about, and something that I'm a huge advocate of, which I think mental health awareness needs to be so much more. And I think we have a very big layer, a very big sort of a background to really understand it better against, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. I think the very fact that from March until now, I think it's become a common joke these days to say, oh, the days don't really matter anymore. Everything just seems like one big, week blending into
Absolutely.
another week. So, as much as we can make light of it, I think it's very telling of a bigger problem actually, which we're not really able to see, gauge, or understand just yet. And that is the fact that we will have at some point sooner or later start seeing some very definite detrimental effects of this particular pandemic on certain sets of people, especially who are high risk and who've had like a history of mental illness in the past. So these sudden lockdowns, like for instance, we were at least, in India, we seem to be, moving into unlock 6, if I remember correctly. I remember reading a thread on Twitter about how we've moved into the next stage of unlock. But unfortunately, you have European countries, you have UK, which have all moved into lockdown again
Yep.
because, the infections are surging. So you can only imagine how difficult this adjustment is for a lot of people who are just being told to just live in confined little spaces. And it's not easy, and it can really act as a trigger to so many different ways of unease. And it's amazing how there are a bunch of researchers from MIT and Harvard that are actually using machine learning to try and understand what is going on in the minds of people based on the kind of posts that are being found on the social networking platform Reddit. So they've analyzed texts of more than 800,000 Reddit posts to date, and researchers were able to identify most significant changes in tone, the content of language that people used as the first wave of the pandemic really started, right from January then through to April. And this analysis really reveals some very key changes in conversations around mental health, and generally there was this edge, that the people seem to be on. And there was an increase in discussion about anxiety and suicide. So using this, they've been able to analyze posts from 15 different subreddit groups, to ensure that there's more diversity in their findings, devoted to just a variety of mental illnesses, including schizophrenia, depression, bipolar disorder. And this has included a bunch of people that are devoted to topics not specified to mental health, but also to personal, finance, fitness, parenting, which are all sort of lighter topics essentially in that same subset. So it's really nice to see how you can actually train algorithms to try and understand multiple varied data sets like this across the board, and really try and figure out who are the people out there that maybe need a little bit more help, and maybe they may not be able to actually voice it out there. And I think when it comes to expressing themselves through social media, or maybe through art, or maybe through music, if NLP can figure out a way to pick up these very subtle hints, I think it can go a long way in trying to make the society a lot more aware and more conscious in terms of mental health awareness and basic mental hygiene.
I completely agree. Like and Chandrasekhar, who he said, I think I keep repeating this. We are way past from an information-driven society to an insight-driven society,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's exactly what's happening here. I mean, since we are mentioning about mental health, it's a very sensitive issue. I mean, due to the way in which society, across the globe, they look at it,
Yeah.
and but also the difficult part is diagnosing it, right? So
Mm.
how do you diagnose? Like, I mean, we say there is a two-way of argument, right? When you say someone who, let's say, not in their best mindset, down, maybe upset,
Mm.
I'm not trying to use the word depressed, because I'm trying to
Widen
show
the
us,
scope. Yeah.
all the signs of depression, right? Someone
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
signs of depression. And you have a category of people who are calling him, oh, he's just lazy, he's just having negative thoughts, he just need to get exercise, he need to get out, he need to think positively. That's one thing. But there's a second group of thought that says, okay, this he might be having a clinical depression, and a lot of that has to do with the chemical combination, the
Yeah.
neurons, the rate of its neurons firing, or how the dopamine receptors, how they react,
Yeah.
all those things in its brain, and the brain system. So that's another way of looking at it. But now there's a question, I mean, I think maybe I'm becoming very skeptical after binge watching South Park, last two seasons of South Park on Netflix, where Cartman has this habit of misusing everything, right? He There's
Mm.
an episode where he comes and say he's gonna kill himself, so everyone should start speaking about suicide prevention, because he wants to get that attention, right? Saying he's
Mm.
gonna kill himself. Similar, there's a whole episode he comes and say he identify himself as a trans, so he can get his own washroom, so I'm saying there are people who always use and misuse things. But then again, there's a question: how do you
Mm.
diagnose it rightly? With the proper diagnostic tools, what
Mm.
we can do is identify the people who actually need help, right?
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
get them to a psychiatrist or a therapist or whatever,
Yeah.
which is ideal.
It's like basically think of it as a telehealth platform, which is essentially
Exactly.
where you're utilizing AI to really sort of speed up a possibility of diagnosis and actually look through and be able to screen more patients.
Hmm.
Hopefully, the an AI bot which is specifically looking to try and detect the at-risk people in the population who have a tendency to display more signs of mental illness. I think identifying these people and ensuring that they are directed to the right path of treatment and intervention, I think, is going to be a huge step. I think just bringing that segregation about is really important. And it's not like physical symptoms,
Exactly.
right? I mean, these symptoms are much harder
Yep.
to trace, track, and
Yep.
correctly
Yep.
diagnose. So it's very important, I think, and I
Yep.
think, and it's great that the tech is headed the right way, in my opinion. And
And
it's
from
yeah,
time to time, I mean personally, I'm personally, as well as we are generally reminded that, see, diagnostic is half the job, right? If
yeah,
you
yeah,
diagnose things right and the right time, you can find solutions. But
yeah.
now you are talking about NLP. Now, what can we? There is another interesting angle in which this research is happening, right?
Mhm.
That is by analyzing your brain waves. This is like deep tech stuff. So
That's
I
deep.
mean, Google or Alphabet has this project called Project Amber, right?
Mm.
So what they do is they use machine learning with something called electroencephalography, yes,
Uh-huh.
EEG. That took me a second to say that. They use that to measure brain activities, the
Right.
brain waves, right? And based on that, they can, okay. So, and based on that, they can reach an assumption whether that person has some issues like depression,
Mm.
or I mean, and I think IBM also developed a similar system a few years back with an accuracy of 98.4%. That's huge.
Mm.
But what put Project Amber in more advanced level is it's portable. It's like a swim cap which you can put around your head, and
Yeah.
it takes only 3 minutes to configure. And I
Yeah.
think, if I'm correct, it might have reached a point by learning, the data set of people who have depression, right? Their
Mm.
brain function, and then once you feed this data, I think you will, EEG data. That's how machine learning was. So
Yeah, that's right.
you
Yeah.
will reach
Yeah.
a point where you can diagnose it better than a doctor. So
Right.
it's exciting, all the research happening, but then there's also a question, right? How much of this research can come to a production setting? How much of this can come to a real life setting? I mean, there's a lot
Yeah.
of challenge there, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think there is a very valid use case to be made over here. I think it's great that organizations are finding more use cases. And if you talk to any data scientist or any startup co-founder today, I think the first and only thing they'll really sort of get excited about is when you give them a tangible use case to work with. And I think that's where I think companies that are really leveraging bots and building bots are going to be really sort of leaders in their particular segment. And I'd like to talk about one such company who we've profiled as a startup of the week. They're Gyani Ai. In fact, those of you who attended Raise, I think, will remember that they got a special mention at the event for their speech to text engines specifically for Indic languages. And I think this is another space which is going to really explode in the years to come. Just given the propensity of internet users that we have in India, specifically the number of users that rural and semi-urban areas can potentially have. I think this is one particular need which can be easily affected. Like I think if you just think about it, right, very logically, if you were to go to any of the urban pockets, you don't necessarily find ready-made instructions to get things done. More often than not, the most common form of communication is verbal. Like there's a sense of familiarity. You tend to build a bond with people, and the first thing that they do there is by just having a conversation. And it's not like you and me, where we essentially people like us live in big cities like New Delhi and Bangalore, where we speak in English. In pockets like this, they will speak in that local language. So here comes a phenomenal opportunity for sort of reconstructing and resurrecting our Indic languages, as well as using NLP and speech to text engines to really sort of marry the two and ensure that this is a great tool for the local populations to really get a lot of work done and really sort of make their life so much easier. And it can be used in various segments like your healthcare. It can be used for retail. There's a huge use case over there, and definitely for BFSI. Banking financial services are becoming so much easier, so much simpler if there are conversational models that can be harnessed. And no doubt, I think one of the biggest applications of this will be in governance, in terms of smart city development, in terms of ensuring that farmers, for instance, get their access to funds, and they can actually sort of get access to the subsidies that they are entitled to, among so many other things. I mean, these are just a few of the use cases I can think of, but these are the various areas that a startup like Gyani.ai is really working on. One of the very significant developments that they've actually done in more recent times is they are also working with Samsung Ventures. I don't know if this is a development that a lot of people are aware of. So a lot of people that don't really know, Samsung Ventures has its own voice assistants called Bixby, and as you of course Samsung is a pretty big player in the Indian smartphone market. Basic stats, I think they have a 26% market share, and it's nearly 156 million users, that are essentially available, for Gyani to really sort of tap into. So they're working with Samsung to really develop, nuanced conversation models that can be essentially used in these rural areas and sort of work with them across different sectors like healthcare and BFSI, for instance. So it's very interesting work that's happening. I think, thanks to startups like this, they're really actually sort of using their technology skills to bridge the real cultural, educational, and, a social divide in the country. And I think bots being unleashed in their full power in these rural areas is really going to be the next wave of transformation in our country. And that's where I think AI is really going to make a very, very big difference.
Yeah, I think we have mentioned it before, even when we are covering the RISE 2020, the
Yeah,
AI, vernacular boards are going to be huge, because
yep,
of the language diversity there, I mean,
correct.
I think the AI will help us build the Tower of Babel, the metamorphical Tower of Babel. So it
Absolutely.
is very exciting, and I think I remember Gnani and Devanagiri, some of the another startup who is on the same field. They were
Yeah,
also were part of the impact challenge, by organized by METI, which is
yeah,
very exciting and very thought invoking. So
yeah.
anyway, it's great to see the kind of development that's happening in this area, and great and much much happier to see Indian entrepreneurs and innovators picking these technologies and trying to deploy in a production setting in a mass scale way in which it
Yeah.
will become much useful.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that's what's the biggest takeaway because it's great to see a lot of research happening in, simulated settings, like I mentioned, and in control settings. But how much of that research can actually be applied to real life is what really is the very utility of it all, right? Because I mean, there's no point in test driving a car. You have to actually take it out there to see how capable it is and see how much it can endure in real life situations. The simulation only takes you so far. So it's great to see that level of work, the level of complexities, and it's also a challenge in a country like India where you can actually sort of marry the scale of operations with the extent of innovation. I think finding that sweet spot is always a challenge, but from the looks of it, I think our entrepreneurs are slowly cracking it, one day, 1 week, and one project at a time. So that's really good.
Anyway, it's always nice to speak to you. That's from us for this week. It's nice speaking to you, Sindhuja. As always, you are learning something. In this process, this is like knowledge sharing, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think, as always, Jivu, I get a lot of my trivia thanks to you, our weekly interactions with you. So thanks again for that. But that's all the time we have today, folks. We'll be back very soon with another round of very exciting stories, views, and opinions on shaping the AI narrative for India. You can follow all the updates on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Until then, stay safe, stay connected.